Hello, welcome to the Realm of Ideas is Free to All. This is my name is Bruce Gemmel. I'm here with Julie Rauer, who is not here, but will be here in a minute. This is a continuing series of ruminations we do once a week. We have a preview on Wednesday evening at 10:30, and then we have our actual program that we do now. Like I said, it's a series of ruminations we do related to work and ideas that we have in relationship to the work that we do as researchers, artists. I'm an architect by training. I don't know. I kind of prefer myself probably to call myself an independent researcher. I'm often asked, like, Bruce, do you consider yourself an architect? I was like, yeah, I do, but I expressed that in a very deep way, probably different than a lot of people would do that. Anyway, the topic for tonight is episode 79, The Next Period in History. So basically, it kind of pertains to the kind of situation that we see ourselves in. We've talked about the idea of kind of things that happen in terms of institutions and societies and how they kind of move between one and the other. We know the kind of different periods that take place. I personally feel as if we're entering into a new age. I think that, kind of I personally refer to it as what I would call the organic age. We'll kind of talk a little bit more specifically like that in a minute. But anyway, I'm going to want to read and kind of do a little bit more from this is, again, one of my favorite books in the whole world, Alfred North Whitehead, The Aims of Education and Other Essays. So this is basically from the very beginning of The Aims of Education. But let us think about what for me is the most important phrase in this book. And I think it's something that basically kind of talks about the nature of what is important about it. And it sounds a little bit odd, but if you think about it, it's why we kind of start to understand how our education has gone wrong or how education can go wrong. The process by which Whitehead talks about education is the acquisition of the art of the utilization of knowledge. It is not simply the accumulation of knowledge. And that's what I think pertains to the importance of the idea that I want to go back to from what I was talking about the other day. So we have to remember that the valuable intellectual development is self-development, and that it mostly takes place between the ages of 16 and 30. As to training, the most important part is given by mothers before the age of 12. A saying due to Archbishop Temple illustrates my meaning. Surprise was expressed at the success in after life of a man who, as a boy at rugby, had been somewhat undistinguished. He answered, "It is not what they are at 18, it is what they become afterwards that matters." In training a child to activity of thought, above all things, we must beware of what I would call inert ideas, and we'll return to this. That is to say, ideas that are merely received into the mind without being utilized or tested or thrown into fresh combinations. Now, again, let's go back to that and read it again. Right? Okay. Education is the acquisition of the art of the utilization of knowledge. It's taking concepts and putting them into kind of like different situations and perspectives, finding the way to kind of get perspectives that have consequence. All right. So, in the history of education, the most striking phenomenon is that schools of learning, which at one epoch are alive with a ferment of genius, in a succeeding generation exhibit merely pedantry and routine. The reason is that they are overladen with inert ideas. Now, these inert ideas are the ones that are unable to be utilized and kind of manipulated. So what happens is they are simply sitting around and they don't have the ability to be utilized. So the acquisition of the art of the utilization of knowledge. Okay. So as it is above all things harmful, right? So here's what he says. The reason is that they are overladen with inert ideas. Education with inert ideas is not only useless, it is above all things harmful. Okay. Now we'll go more into where these things come from and how we have to think about that. But what happens is the institution becomes, the caretaking aspect of the institution becomes untenable, and it starts to become a detriment. So the harmful, now he uses the Latin corruptio optimi pessima, which I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it means corruption of the best is the worst, right? Except for rare intervals of intellectual ferment, education in the past has been radically infected with inert ideas. This is the reason why uneducated, clever women who have seen much of the world are in middle age so much more cultural and so much more cultured part of the community. They have been saved from this horrible burden of inert ideas. Every intellectual revolution which has ever stirred humanity into greatness has been a passionate protest against inert ideas. Then, alas, with pathetic ignorance of human psychology, it is preceded by some educational scheme to bind humanity, ironically, afresh with inert ideas of its own fashioning. So what happens is the mind has to be nimble, the mind has to be free, it has to be light. It has to basically not carry this ballast. And what happens is it needs to kind of weed out those things that no longer become relevant. So what happens is it's really something that has to be culled and nurtured like a garden. Let us not ask how in our system of education we are to guard against this mental dry rot. We enunciate two educational commandments. Do not teach too many subjects. And again, what we teach, teach thoroughly. The result of teaching small parts of large numbers of subjects is a passive reception of disconnected ideas, not illuminated with any spark of vitality. So it basically becomes a kind of a clutter. So what happens is all these things that really are of any lacking of any consequence are basically just cluttering around and basically getting in the way. So the few things that you have that you can use nimbly to manipulate to kind of generate perspective is what you need. Let the main ideas which are introduced into a child's education be few and important, and let them be thrown into every combination possible. And again, go back to the idea. Education is the acquisition or the art of the utilization of knowledge, since not the accumulation of facts or knowledge. So again, allow the individual by putting different combinations together. We talk about the operation of the metaphor. The operation of the metaphor, and next we'll talk about abstraction. These are the ways to kind of create this nimble opportunism of being able to utilize the things that you are given as tools to create compelling, architecturally provocative artifacts or whatever, but within the ability to operate within the metaphor and create what we talk about in different circumstances. From the very beginning of his education, the child should experience the joy of discovery. The discovery which it has to make is that general ideas give an understanding of that stream of events which pours through this life, which is his life. And again, we talked about self-sufficiency. We talked about Emerson. You need to understand your circumstance within the circumstance of which is your destiny, which is your time. So how does that relate to this? Simply, we are entering into a specific time. We've talked about, we understand the idea of the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, and then we have the Age of Genius, we have the scientific revolution, we have the Enlightenment, we have the Industrial Age, we have the modern age. I believe the next step is the organic age, because I think in terms of the discoveries of Freud, the discoveries of Darwin, the discoveries of Einstein, discoveries of many of these people, we're starting to see that some of our preconceived anthropocentric ideas are starting to kind of become incredibly frayed and incredibly loosened. And as a result, we are changing the hierarchy that starts to kind of underpin this age and allows us to really appreciate some of the things that we see in this organic world. So with that as a beginning, we've also talked about the fact that some of the things that I'm summing up a lot from what's happened in the last couple of weeks is that the institutions that are that fervent, then the genius kind of comes from, basically becomes embodied in the institutions and they become the caretakers. However, at a certain time, that inertia starts to impede the ability for these principles not just to be any more vital, but even to be understood. We've talked about the idea of when you lose the understanding of the principle. But at the same time, maybe that's a healthy thing because it gives rise to the possibility that the genius who is coming of the next generation, as they rise to understanding, sees the fact that there is going to be dissatisfaction because the new time is going to demand new innovations, new abstractions, new operations of the metaphor to basically create those things that will become the principles that will be, in this case, maybe the organic age or whatever. Anyway, with that incredibly long-winded preamble, I now go to the most important part of the program. What's new in Julie, my loved one?
Thank you.
You're welcome, P.
Is my drawing somewhere?
It's in the bag. Sorry, I didn't take it out.
Oh.
I blame myself. But anyway, give us an idea where we are.
Okay, well, I can only show
Back
it
from foreign correspondent duty is Penguin.
Okay. I can talk about it. Be better to show it.
Yeah, go get it.
Go get it.
All right, I will kind of. So there we are. So one of the things I found, and Julie spoke a lot about this briefly on Wednesday, is the fact that certain things that we came to think were a certain way, now we're starting to kind of see that these things were not necessarily inaccurate, but they kind of like weren't a kind of reference that was maybe sustainable within the opportunities that I think it was natural for a industrial age to kind of like worship the paradigm of the machine and its kind of like artificial nature. However, what we've started to see is that the greatest machines or superior to the machine, the mechanism, superior to the mechanism is indeed the organism. So as we move into that, we start to see the fact that there are the opportunities to see the somewhat, immature or kind of like somewhat kind of prejudicial or kind of like ignorant thinking that went about believing in the primacy in the hierarchy of the human. That's only natural, given the fact that we have pertained a certain status in the world. We kind of isolated ourselves, and as a result of that isolation, have a certain belief in our superiority. Now, as a result, as time goes on, certain things that we used to believe are now really very much coming under question. And I think as a result of coming under question, they give the opportunity for this organic age. Now, I believe from my own beliefs in architecture that there is a truly organic architecture that has been talked about, has a kind of root in the American Midwest, and has and also an understanding in like what I would say the broad acre city mentality or the agrarian Jeffersonian mentality, but certainly could have a circumstance in that idea of kind of growing and tilling and nurturing your own buildings rather than this kind of machine mentality. I do see this in architecture starting to kind of like peak its say up, but I do believe it has a long way to go, but it could happen. Anyway, back to my loved one, now that you have your drawing as well.
Can you hold it up?
I give up, can I?
I don't know.
Oh, B. I love this drawing. This is so beautiful.
Oh, thanks. I'll just jump in here.
Just jump in there, B.
Try.
Well, you didn't have your drawing out.
Somebody didn't take it out. I got you there.
Was it my job to take out?
Yeah, you always take out my drawing.
No, it's to open jars, carry heavy objects, and kill spiders.
And take my drawing out.
But a woman could certainly take. In fact, women are much more delicate.
You do it every week.
I do,
and
but I mean,
suddenly you didn't.
Yeah, men are absent-minded. We need to be reminded.
Okay, well, I'll jump in at 14 minutes.
Jump in.
Okay.
I knew. Remember the time you stopped me from speaking? Remember, he's like, and he was like, "Oh, that's right, I was stopping you from speaking." Big one. Ow.
Okay.
Penguin's a witness. She saw that. She saw all of it.
All right, I'll just start in here. I finished my drawing today. I had actually finished it yesterday.
Sounds like the piece from
as Mother died today, or maybe it was yesterday. I was just about to say
I love that.
It's because we have one big mind with two straws. Anyway, So I finished it yesterday, but I signed it today. And if you zoom in on my signature, which is that corner, you will see I created a new typeface, which I have named Bombas, Bombas. Why is it called that? That is the Latin word for bumblebee.
Oh,
And it is based on the anatomy and physiology and behaviors of the bumblebee. So I created obviously all the letters for my name, JULIERAUER, and the date, 5/30/26. But I will task you and me with a wonderful and inventive job, which is to craft the rest of the Bombas.
I was going to ask that. I was
Typeface.
going to ask that because that I
Yeah.
think would be a really beautiful
Yeah, I
idea.
texted that to
That's
you.
a great idea. That's a great idea.
Yeah, in
Good,
fact,
good, good.
we're, right as I did it anyway. So if you zoom on in, you will note this area in my drawing here is, in fact, what the physics of violin music looks like. Now, these are not full violins. These are a different instrument that is a very close relative called a pochette. Now, a pochette is a pocket violin used by visiting dance masters from the 15th to the 18th centuries. They were much more affordable than a violin, much more portable than a violin, able to literally fit in a pocket. And you can see I have drawn in a number of pochettes at various sizes instead of the pistils and the stamens coming out of the flowers. And right up through here is what the sound waves literally look like from a violin, which, by the way, are dramatically different from the physics of sound coming out of a piano, out of a human voice, out of a clarinet, out of a harp. They all have their very specific and particular sound wave patterns, and mine are accurate to what the physics of a pochette, which they don't have a pochette. It's a very, very obscure instrument, but it does produce very similar sound waves, one octave higher than a violin, but it's kind of like
And why is this important and has a tremendous bearing on what we're talking about today, which is crucial? It's because what does the bumblebee do?
yes, the bumblebee
Brilliantly.
can perceive and detect and create and imitate and here's the word, recognize a variety of human rhythms in music and rhythms in other species, not just insects, but many other species, including mammals, including amphibians, and can recognize and respond and react to multiple kinds of rhythms in multiple chords with all sorts of different melodies and configurations.
Right. And
Yes.
of course, anyone who suspects
Yes,
that
Pete.
something that sophisticated with that kind of intelligence and that
Yes.
kind of apparatus would not speculate as to the way in which one could generate these things for their own basis.
That's why I call him my little bumblebee.
That's right.
Because
So the
he's
reality
so
is,
smart.
just as we kind of are starting to understand, and I, again, I refer to my lecture at the museum.
Bombas.
Yes, in fact, I talked about the bumblebee in my lecture at the Museum of Natural History.
Yeah.
And I talked about the fact that humans were actually, in the upper echelons, and then now I realize that was probably wrong of me to say that. We're probably not in the upper echelons of engineering and architecture. And I kind of remember how people we got incredibly sad. They're so sad, but we built the Empire State Building in Brooklyn Bridge. It's and these are nice for us, but then when they were compared to the things that exist in the kind of organic architectural environment, like a termitary, ant hills, things like that, they're oh, it was incredibly sobering moment. It was incredibly somber. And I kind of think one woman actually cried But the point is,
it's very sobering.
Yeah, well, yeah, but
not
here's the
understand
idea.
that you're
I
not
mean,
the queen of the universe.
exactly. So we're not the queens of the universe. We're not,
No.
we're not even in the top 10.
Anyway,
But the
let's
reality,
let's
so the point
launch.
is,
Yeah.
if there is a way to kind of like possibly
I'll put this in
close
a
that
safe
gap,
place. Yes.
is to understand and appreciate the
I'll
fact
put
that
charcoal.
as proud as we can be of our mechanisms and our operations, the possibility of delving, at least initially, and understanding, appreciating our ignorance in the organic realm, right, is something that maybe is something we're able to start to acknowledge at this point. I mean, again, and I kind of see my particular view from my own particular vantage point. I have my particular perspective. But again, when I talked about the idea in the lecture that I gave in 1989 about the idea of wanting to one day grow and live in my own, organically grown architecture, and people thought I was insane, though that still seems like an insane comment when I make it, there are people who, I can, who I know in the architectural world who are starting to look at these organic component and organic component structural systems that have a particular interest pertaining to that. So
I'd like to launch since we're well in.
Yes. Okay,
Yes,
Pete.
okay,
I'm sorry, I was talking again. I'll make sure
Oh.
I don't do that again. And, before teas, tea, jasmine,
And mint.
With the summer coming, a little bit
Yes.
slightly chilled the refrigerator before, it is the best, most refreshing thing you can have in the hot summer months.
It's incredibly refreshing.
My love.
Thank you. I also recommend having these tea with wagashi, which are incredibly hard to find in this country and incredibly easy to find in Japan. We're not in. I miss Taraya too. Anyway, I'd like
to. Yes, kind of launch.
Okay.
Way.
So, a wonderful segue, and boy, do I have a lot of notes. So this might roll on over into the next podcast. Is the work of Dr. Toshitaka Suzuki at the University of Tokyo, which is a segue to the discovery of the research article just published in the journal Science, on which I based my science drawing we just showed you. This is incredibly upending research on avian linguistics. And Dr. Toshitaka has done years and years of research, over 10 years of direct observation in the wild on the Japanese tit. And the Japanese tit is...
it is real. It does exist.
Yes, yes, it certainly does. Is Parus minor. And here's what he found: a very complex avian language. Everyone thought, like they thought of the bumblebee, that, the birds had a couple of chirps and the birds made a call, and that the chirps didn't really mean anything, and the chirps never changed, and the birds were not smart enough to actually alter or combine the chirps. Here's what Dr. Toshitaka Suzuki found, proved over and over again, and published. May I?
Yes, by all means.
Okay.
I will follow that.
Thank
you.
And
also, we'll comment on Mr. Spock's comment, which was actually very much pertained to what you're about to say.
Right.
I love it.
Thanks, Pete. I'm sucking on auricular because I can't breathe because I've got major pollen allergies. Right. So you'll all have to excuse me. Anyway, so the Japanese tit uses rule-based language. It's very structured and it's very rigorous. Words that are not applied to avian or any kind of animal linguistics. We'll be discussing a discovery linguistics, and I'll give you a rundown. He published a number of papers. I'm summarizing super fast. Go look up the research. It's fascinating. So The birds use rule-based language, words, syntax, visual gestures to communicate very specific, ever evolving messages. So, words and meaning. They chirp very distinct notes for precise meanings, not randomly. They're incredibly thoughtful, and they possess a very high level of cognitive function. They have syntax and grammar with every phraseology. These are novel instructions, and here they have referential visualization, meaning, and this is abstract thought, which will go into our next show.
Yeah.
Because everyone thought animals are not capable of abstract thought and abstraction, meaning
Or speculation.
Mm-hmm. So tits repeatedly have the ability to visualize the abstraction of a predator. I will say this again because this is mind-blowing and upended the entire field of animal linguistics. So a Japanese tit can abstractly visualize in their mind's eye all sorts of predators that are not yet there, meaning they are not seeing them. They can talk about them, they can discuss them, and they know what predators they're talking about in absentia. Before seeing the actual predator, they have a language to talk about it, and he has proven they are visualizing the predator and describing different calls for different predators. Gestural language, full of gestures and signals, and multilingualism. Okay, here is the most fascinating thing. Tits can even interpret and understand the vocalizations of, are you sitting down? Other species.
That doesn't surprise me.
Other species, such as willow tits and other kinds of birds and other kinds of animals. They apply their own grammatical rules to foreign calls to decode group messages.
Right.
Yay.
But they would never, ever postulate the idea of speculation of this information on its own account. No, absolutely not. Right.
No.
Yeah. Anyway, it's interesting because this kind of brings me back to something that I've read before and refers back to a kind of a thing that I always enjoy, which is a kind of connectivity. You were looking for von Frisch's Animal Architecture book, which I always had. And I realized this is a related thing. This comes from Bronowski's The Origins of Knowledge and Imagination.
One of your favorites.
One of my favorites, exactly, because he was a brilliant guy. And, he's like, let's just call, I don't know what we should call people polymaths anymore, just like smart people. Anyway, I always like this critique. Now I'd like to forget about anatomy and function and settle down to the question of how this has come about. There are two schools of thought. There are those who think that obviously evolution has been continuous and therefore the speech area and the gift of speech must be continuous with animal sounds. Then there are others like Chomsky and in particular Eric Lendenberg who think that human speech is an altogether specific gift, discontinuous from any animal function. And this basically refers to Chomsky's Cartesian Linguistics, Harper and Row, 1966, which is an incredibly valuable book. And then Lendenberg's Biological Foundations of Language, which at a time was very much a speculative question. I think it was never really a speculative question. I think it was always very clear, but now it seems as if we're really getting to the point where it's a settled issue. I do not think that they are right. I think that their view is a misinterpretation, which largely rests on a misunderstanding of the way evolution has worked in man. It misses, in my opinion, the fact that human evolution has, I repeat the phrase, been dominated so completely by human culture itself for the past million years. Human culture has been the most important selective influence in making men what they are. So I think that human speech is indeed a continuation of animal communication, and the interesting thing, therefore, is to see where it differs. So the point is not it's discontinuous, it's that it is continuous, but we can be distracted by all the different machinations and iterations that came through it. But I think the point is, it would be delightful to spend a long time on on the enchanting subject of animal communication. The displays of the bowerbird when courting the mate, the dance of the honeybees when directing foragers to source the nectar, the way in which the great-chested grebe picks up bits of weed from the bottom of a lake and presents it to his spouse while preening his feathers and flapping his wings. These are subjects to which I cannot do justice. And in fact, Julie has just done so by seeing that the honeybee, the bumblebee, is actually more magnificent in its understanding of the technique of sound and the manipulation and creation and generation of sound than any virtuoso, than any brilliant genius composer that ever could be. And you always wonder, hey, why is it that we have such a limited range of sound that we hear, yet there's ranges that are beyond our comprehension, but we never would think that they're of greater complexity. To me, that's incredibly ignorant and arrogant. So, again, speculations on an organic age.
Yes.
Okay, back to P.
Thanks. So thank you, P. So building upon the over 200 plus words of the Japanese tit, they have a vocabulary that's larger than most human children. And most human adults, yeah.
No, but again, this is the known language. What
happens
is, again, a lot of times what happens when you're scratching the surface, and this can be misleading, we say, we first thought that, they had a handful of words. Then we realized that, that turned out to be hundreds, then thousands, then millions. So the reality is, at this point, just the same way we thought that, everything in the animal world was instinct, right? We now realize it's not instinct, it's character. And again, this refers back to, because Bronowski, when he talks about the preceding pages, he talks about von Frisch and his animal architecture, which again, these books that we picked up anecdotally, just seeing curiosity, we start to see the threads coming together.
Okay. I'd like to continue.
Okay.
So after you all search out Dr. Toshitaka's 2014 paper, Compositional Syntax in the Japanese Tit, I would like to talk about
Sounds like a he or she title.
Yes, it does. How plants plan, that's plants, formulate, sorry,
Pete.
Pollen. Thank you. Man, this pollen sucks. I'll start again. How plants plan, formulate, imagine, and manifest their own futures. Now, this is a topic I have because people, including plant scientists, don't ascribe any of these characteristics to plants. These are epigenetic, thanks, P. These are epigenetic adaptations for future success. And I would like to talk about tonka beans, something probably people don't even know exist.
Those are the ones you put in the ground and you water and they become those little trucks, right?
Yeah, you're so whimsical.
Could happen.
So this is the way I describe the tonka bean, because they are devious. They have a brilliance that is far beyond what you may think. They are a marvel of microscopic culinary Russian roulette. And yes, that is the right term. They are deadly. They're also delicious. I'm going to explain. So tonka beans, Dipteryx odorata. Note the word odorata. It's all about scent. It's the intelligence of scent to manipulate your past history, your fatal present, and your fascinatingly architected future. So they are called the bean with the delicious flavor with a toxic secret. So tonka bean seeds all contain the that's so nice, hepatotoxic. And for those of you who don't know, it means toxic to the human and animal liver. So the highly hepatotoxic chemical isolate coumarin, which is a powerful drug substance. So this is something, oh, that's so nice. Thanks, P. That the plant uses in chemical self-defense. But I posit it's not just used in self-defense, it is used in active aggression towards interlopers, including humans. So ironically and quite paradoxically, the tonka bean seeds have an incredible flavor and scent. And as toxic as they are, is as heady and alluring as their scent is and their flavor. It is an incredibly complex scent that encompasses cinnamon, vanilla, cherry, cloves, amaretto, and almond all at once. It's used in perfumes and soaps. They go on human skin. And yes, it is highly toxic. And when absorbed through the skin, it is. But it's all about the culinary math. And the culinary math, it's so nice, Petal, is a standard recipe serving, say, of 6 to 8 dinner guests, unless you want them to be dead dinner guests, uses a mere, and I'm not kidding, 1/8 of a tonka bean seed. Wow. Not a bean, a seed, for everybody. Any more, and you will poison them. So their seeds all contain 1% to 3% of coumarin, but can achieve levels of up to 10%. Now, that's quite a lot when something has a fatal toxicity. And a culinary exposure versus toxic threshold, which is a very interesting mathematical and culinary equation. I will say it again because it really is a fascinating topic that bears repetition. So, culinary exposure versus toxic threshold. That's marvelous. He's marvelous. So coumarin is simultaneously, so this same poison is the Janus head of toxicity and delightful scent. It is exactly the same toxin, not a version of coumarin. It is coumarin itself. Now, when you have a fatal toxin that you can, as a plant, manipulate in history, in your lifetime, in generations of plants, and it has in environmental conditions, you are writing your own past, you are ensuring your present, and predicting a successful future. Oh, right there, that's where it is. So amazingly, a single tonka bean can flavor 50 to 80 individual portions of dessert from a single bean. And the science and the math is this. A tonka bean weighs 1.5 grams. 1 to 3% is pure coumarin toxin. So 15 milligrams to 45 of coumarin exists per bean. Now that's quite a range. So you will get acute liver and kidney damage that is irreversible in humans.
Always good.
If you exceed even 1 gram. So there we have something. What do you think, Peapod?
Stay away from that.
Yes. He's not a tonka bean. He's a peapod.
Yes, I am.
It's very sweet. It's a very interesting paradox, isn't it?
Right. No, it is. It is. I think that, we're starting to.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you, Pete. So
You're great.
yeah, actually, when we just there's something
please
here
do,
was talking about. He said, and I don't know if you know this book, W.H. Thorpe, Birdsong: The Biology of Vocal Communications and Expression in Birds. He talks about the fact here, again, this is the same book, Brunellesky's Origin of Knowledge and Imagination. He actually very much goes back to the situation with organic organism, with organic nature, organic things.
Mhm.
And it doesn't. So he talks about here. Let's see, where is it? For instance, an animal utters a cry of alarm because natural selection has operated in favor of those animals which uttered the cry of alarm, and in favor of those other members of the species which heeded the cry and took cover. It is an obviously well worked out, self-correcting survival mechanism, and it does not operate only within a particular species, because Thorpe has observed birds heed the alarm cry of a bird of an entirely different species whose cry has no sound in common with their own alarm cry, which you were talking about before.
Yes.
It is clear that
Yes.
this kind of noise, cries of alarm or hunger, courtship, gestures of noise, cries to signal that the individual has found food, form a very restricted vocabulary, which, so far as we know, is built into the animal genetically, both in emission and in response. Now, we have had concepts that exist in different languages that basically have different words. So again, in this case, they're ahead of the fact that we had to invent them all separately and then realize there was a commonality. They've done that well in advance of us.
Yes, they
And then he
have.
talks about, for instance, according to von Frisch, again, this is the animal architecture, honeybees signal the location of the rich source of nectar by running in sort of, we know that, the kind of waggle dance, in which the directions of the main sign point to where the food is, and speed at which the figure is run is estimated distance away. And this system seems to work very well. Von Frisch, most recent work, has shown the story to be rather more complicated than this. And again, Von Frisch wrote Animal Architecture, but he also wrote, this is an interesting book, Bees, Their Vision, Chemical Senses, and Language. And this is from 1950. And the other book, Thorpe's, came from 1961. So again, the animal architecture book, which is a later piece by von Frisch, now kind of connects, like I said, all these pieces that we kind of, found curiosities in. I'm sure that there are other people who started to see these curiosities and started to connect the dots and started to see the fact that there are these correlations that heed this idea of a greater sophistication among the organic aspects than in human, which again is organic as well, but has always kind of seen itself as the artificial rather than the natural part of the Darwinian universe. So,
Yes.
okay.
Well, I'd like to introduce you all to a wonderful word that you won't be able to stop saying because it's so whimsical and charming. It sounds like a fake word, but it's a real word.
Is it better than tit?
Yeah.
Hard to imagine.
Grondwitloof. Come on, that's a great word. Oh, can I have a sip?
Yeah. Sounds like the German word for affection.
No, it's
No, it's like-
that's funny.
Yeah, they're such a whimsical people.
I love you with all my Grondwitloof.
That's
That's a good one.
It
Yeah.
is. It's true.
It's better than German. It's Belgian because it actually has some melody to it because German is such a beautiful language.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just kidding. Anyway, Grondwitloof means white gold, which is really a nice term. And it refers to the queen of all Belgian endives. So, yes, I'm talking
I
about.
like this.
Yes, this is a very interesting topic that we were talking about with our ridiculous 30-minute wait for the subway, but at least it was time well spent on the Grondwitloof production and life cycle and farming methodology, which I find absolutely fascinating because it is bizarrely quirky. And what is better on a late night Saturday than the bizarrely quirky lives of chlorophyll deprived Belgian vegetables? Aha.
I can't think of anything.
See? Okay, so here is what's fascinating. The Belgian endive is in the chicory family, which is rather delicious. Chicorum intybus. And Witloof, Loof, means white leaf. It's a kind of a chicory. But it has a 2-year basic. And I say that because it's very malleable. It's very changeable. It's a biennial, which is one of the least common types of plants. It means it has a 2-year growing cycle until it reaches maturity. Now, that's a fairly long time for a plant that's not a tree. It doesn't have a woody stalk. It's a fairly fragile plant. So what humans have done is humans have used the witloof's biennial properties to human advantage. Interestingly, and I must make a statement, when you have a biennial plant in the wild, they act very differently from when they're in cultivation.
Interesting.
Guess how long the Belgian endive often takes to reach its mature form in the wild? Just a guess.
10 years.
Oh, that is good. 3 to 4 years, which is almost double its life cycle. But yeah, I mean, you are right, and it is substantially longer. So here is what happens, and here is how humans have intervened. Now, if most of you have seen a Belgian endive, which are delicate and pale white with a little bit of green or yellow at the tips, they don't have any chlorophyll, and they are white. They're very pure, icy, snowy color. They're delicate. They almost have a fresh green apple kind of a perfume.
Not unlike Belgians. It's true.
And crispy too.
No, I don't know about Belgians being crispy, but I know that they're white and they don't have chlorophyll.
It's true.
It's true.
Yes.
It's true. So I mean, that makes sense that they come from Belgium.
And you can melt cheese on them.
You could probably melt cheese on Belgians.
That's what I'm talking about.
It's possible.
You can melt cheese on a Belgian.
Yeah.
Anyway, so in the first year, the Belgian endive, or Grand Witloof, which is the height of the Belgian endive, the most cultivated and desirable one, is grown in the field. So this is its first year growing season. It is harvested in all of the green leaves, and they're pretty substantial and very, very verdant and very, very green, are guillotined in Paris style. So they're cut off, and the tap roots that are very long and have lots of interesting tangles and tendrils and look like little old Chinese men are taken indoors, but stored in a human-generated artificial winter, which is fascinating. So the conditions are created to mimic winter. So it's an artificial winter. In their second year of life, this overwintering process, this tap root is then prompted to resprout in the dark, indoors, in the total absence of sunlight. Hence, no chlorophyll is produced. There's no contact. They are covered with heavy blankets, sheets, or metal. And there's no chlorophyll. This prevents leaves from either turning green or opening up, which is that closed lozenge. It's your favorite shape, or torpedo-like shape. They're always a lozenge closed shape, like a flame shape, a lozenge shape. So there is a hydroponics method, which brings us to another fascinating and whimsical word, hydrowitloof. In the middle of the night, if you need to chuckle, wake up and say hydrowitloof. It'll just have you chuckling. So yes, then these incredibly tall towers of vertically stacked, horizontal, very rustic looking wooden crates. I mean, it seriously looks like something that's the path leading to the witch's house and Hansel and Gretel, the Grimm's fairy tale, are literally nailed together in an afternoon. They're not high tech. This does not. They're stacked up to the ceiling, and they're grown in the dark indoors. From the taproot only, they are forced to resprout, which takes advantage of their biennial nature. So humans have altered the history, the very lexicon, the growing patterns, the organic architecture of the Belgian endive.
Interesting. I think these extremes of breeding because this is a kind of very cultivated thing.
Oh, oh yeah.
Almost kind of like to the point where I always wondered, when you look at endive close to the husk, or I guess the base, there was always just a tiny little bit of yellow, never green, but a little yellow. And I always felt like, where did that come from? Now, understanding there probably was some kind of remaining chlorophyll substance enough to stain at least some of the venation of the endive. But I mean, I wonder, how that was. It basically kept in the taproot as it was basically then taken and kind of like reinvigorated, or was it something where maybe some light penetrated during the process of these things being cultivated? And the other thing is, once that happens, can you reuse the taproot? So that was an interesting question. Well, actually, based on the article, we could maybe ask, I mean, I don't want to think, one of the fun things is we're not scientists, we're researchers, but the thing is, we have some very close friends. I mean, actually, most of our close friends were in the sciences, not in the arts.
Ask George.
Yeah, I'll ask George. But the thing is, we could ask the scientists who wrote the paper.
Sure.
Just ask them. So anyway, we'll find out. But I mean, I found that those are the kind of questions that, I find that a lot of times when you kind of understand the mechanism, you start to kind of think like, oh, what's the next step? How does this happen?
I can speculate on a quick answer, though.
Go.
It's taken from my knowledge of the behavior, life cycle, growth cycles of biennial plants in general, is they die after they reproduce in their second year. So I doubt that the tap roots are viable after the second and final year of their lives. They only live for 2 years, or in the wild 3 to 4, or in Bruce World 10,
maybe,
which would be great.
That'd be great.
They're actually maybe ones that live for a really long time, because there's probably a process in the wild that's never been seen.
Yes, right, exactly.
So I think
and the thing is, they probably get deleted.
Yeah.
Right. As a result of the artificial process.
Right, meaning that's not their natural cycle. It is a human induced cycle.
I love these ideas of these kind of like, I know it's so sad, P. I know it's so, but again, a lot of this rolls into abstraction, and next week it does.
I already sent you an email with an image.
I'm gonna I'll put the image on the next the upcoming.
Isn't that exciting?
Yeah, exactly.
Exciting.
Yes, exactly. So anyway, I think that this really does start to give an idea. I mean, again, one of the things I want to say is that we often used to just refer to animals as this idea of instinct. There was just the instinct, and everything they did was instinctual, and there was no kind of, and it was kind of like just written into their genetic material, and it was there was no understanding of consciousness, there was no understanding of character, of individuality. And even now we're kind of like, again, because we're overcoming our own ignorance and arrogance, we're starting to see the fact that that was incredibly wrong. Want to make a quick speculation is the reason why I felt that this might have come about is that this was not a scientific idea to think of an anthropocentric universe. This came about as a result of maybe never kind of scientifically kind of coming to this conclusion, just simply accepting it. I mean, it's going to sound a little bit weird. It's like,
Oh, go ahead. Say it'll be fun.
No, I think that one of the things I remember reading Kitty Ferguson's book, and also like reading some work by Carl Sagan, is the fact that like everyone assumes that, science is basically taken as science and it's infallible in it, and that, religion and traditions are basically taken on faith. But in fact, that's not completely true. I mean, yes, the religion is basically taken on superstition, and it's basically taken on faith. But there are certain faith-based things that even the most rational and reasonable person in the scientific realm has to appreciate, which is the universe is knowable, or the fact that there is cause and effect, and that see very good reason to believe the reality is this situation is one of those cases. Is this indeed the case? So we, in a way, kind of stumbled into a similar situation where we assumed like, okay, we haven't proved the idea of an anthropocentric universe, but now I think as we've understood over the course of time, we first, man was in the center of the universe, then basically he was into the side, then he was to the side. Even on his own planet, he is not the dominant species. He is basically not the most advanced species. And I think as a result, again, it turns towards this idea that we're looking more and more for inspiration in the organic rather than the mechanized. So mechanisms, I believe, will give way to organisms, and organisms will be the way in which we kind of move forward. Like I said, it's starting to happen artificially. We're starting to kind of like look at the fact that we're getting away from nuts and bolts and bricks and grout, and we're starting to get into these kind of more of these kind of like organic systems and organic processes. Process thinking by Whitehead, I believe, is a very good example of a kind of way into a kind of organic thinking. I think that there's certainly people who have kind of given us indications of how to move through here. So that's where I think. So this idea of instinct was definitely something that we now have come to understand was a little bit, either ignorant, arrogant, a little bit of both. So with that said, P.
Yes, I will end with some traditionalists, some staunch traditionalists in Belgium who have, instead of just moving the outside inside and creating an artificial winter, have moved the inside back outside to create an artificial midnight. Meaning they are now taking, but just a few, taking the taproots back outside, replanting them, and covering them with blankets and sheets outside to block out the outside sun, which I find fascinating.
Okay. All right, good. So next week, the topic is, let's see, it was like basically the importance of abstraction. And that basically the importance of abstraction, part of that is dealing with the idea of identifying thank you. Identifying those things that can give us rise to understanding and appreciating that which is to come next. So, we will be looking at that, and we will have our preview on Wednesday at 10:30 as usual. And then we will be here back next Sunday at this time, 2 a.m. So any last words?
Just in future, I will be talking about trichomes, plant immunity mechanisms, and I will just leave it at that because that's a cliffhanger.
Right. And
the trichome cliffhanger.
I'm going to try to, horizontally gene share between this week and next week and start trying to figure out how I can photosynthesize.
I have every confidence that you'll be able
I think it's possible. Anyway, so the realm of ideas is free to all, and it's to benefit all for us to keep it just that way.
Precisely.
Stay free.